Recording in progress.
Wait a few minutes for Jack. Well, we don't. We do. I'm sorry? Yes, yes. Poor Jack, yeah, he's got a hard stop at 9, but yeah, he's. Yeah, yesterday came to the advisory committee meeting. Oh, he it's a 13-hour drive. Okay. Okay. All right, let me just get, I want to launch Zoom on my laptop so I can stick it.
Yeah.
Packed house. What? It was a packed house tonight. You got a haircut? Nice, nice. Yeah. Yeah, great people here. Yeah.
Everybody ready? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. This is the June 11th, 2024 City of Trinidad, California council meeting. And I would like to begin this session. Thank you very much. Today, so we have no report out from that. And we'll go ahead then, and before we start with the agenda, I did want to note that Councillor Ladwood will not be joining us tonight. He's on vacation. So let's start with approval of the agenda. Any comments or questions from the council about tonight's agenda? I have none. From the public, any public comments or questions about tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, then we'll move on to council reports and committee assignments. I'll start with you.
Nothing to report tonight.
How about the minutes? I should apologize. There are no minutes to review tonight. So we'll then go ahead with the, if you have any council reports.
I do from the Animal Advisory Committee. We met last night. It was kind of a fun, very quick, but effective meeting. And I have 3 motions were passed in the meeting to recommend to the City Council to consider. One is we would like to request, doing budget, that we would like to request a $500, up to $500 budget for the things that may or may not be needed by the committee. The second one was to ask for the services of Russ Gans so we can make the state, county, and city ordinances around dogs, particularly aggressive dogs, compatible. We'll need his assistance for that. And the third one was that it's in June 30th is the renewal of all dog licenses in the city. We'd like to do a citywide mailing with with a cover letter encouraging people to get relicensed, and with a few paragraphs about aggressive dogs and what to do with a phone number. And then, talking about leash laws and about friendly Trinidad, but we want safe Trinidad also. And then Jack had a great idea of putting in there a refrigerator magnet with the town hall phone number.
Yeah.
So we'd like the approval to go ahead and put that together. And of course, the cover letter will be, I would seek the city or the mayor's approval before. But those three motions were requested.
Okay. In terms of procedure, I think we can approve this because the budget is less than, $500 or less. And, certainly getting the Leo help and then also the letter. The refrigerator magnet, the only suggestion I would have is include the animal control hotline number, the direct line to animal control maybe. I don't know if you talked about that.
We did talk about that, but I think what most people would be more comfortable just calling the town hall so we can report it.
Okay.
And then we can have city staff
Okay.
depend on.
The thinking was that in the latest aggressive attack on Ted Pease, that the dog was known to be aggressive by some of his neighbors, but nothing was ever said to the town hall. So if people felt they could call and say, there's a dog in my neighborhood, I'm scared to walk past it,
Okay.
that we could then informally investigate it.
Okay.
Before going to animal control,
Oh.
upping the ante.
Yeah, cool. Jack, did you have anything?
I have a little bit from HCOG. First of all, the unmet transit needs there were lots of comments this year. One thing they are planning on doing is, if they haven't already done it, is increase the busing from McKinleyville to Arcata. So it'll be double the busing and people can get to Arcata from McKinleyville a lot easier. There's also a new project that they're putting together. It's called the Humboldt Multimedia and Vibrant Neighborhoods Planning Project. Just something they're working on to make everything more walkability is supposed to be good, safe biking, and they're going to work with schools to try to help keep the kids safe coming and going from school. So it's a big project they're working on. And if you are interested in HCOG at all, there's a new website. I believe it's up. I'm not positive. I didn't check it before I came. But they have a new website, so it's more people friendly. So if you are interested in what's going on at HCOG, please look it up and see what they put up. That's it.
All right. And I have nothing for tonight, other than I did attend the Coast Guard changing of the guard, and that was really fun. And there's a nice write-up in the paper, so Patty did, which was really fun, and it was a great experience. Let me go to any public comments or questions regarding the committee report outs.
Thinking about the dogs.
I'm sorry?
Thinking about the dogs.
You can, yes, make a comment about that. Absolutely.
I do know that when I was walking my little dog. the other
Yes, can you
day-
come up to the podium, please? I apologize, but I
Alright.
made you do that, but the Zoom folks can't hear.
When I was walking my little dog the other day, that street that's not. Street, it's not Ocean, but the one over.
Uh-huh.
There was an aggressive dog that. I'm a big fat dog lover, but this dog was jumping up. Now the fence, mind you, was quite high, as appropriate, I would think, Looked like a dog run fence. And then, but the dog's head was over. And I was a little concerned that maybe the dog could get over, but
Okay.
it didn't. And I used some pretty heavy duty commands, and then apparently the owner came out and said something, blah, 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 to the dog. And so that was good, but I'd never seen this dog before, and it did definitely concern me.
Mhm.
That's the only aggressive dog I've ever seen in Trinidad, just to say.
So that's good to know, and maybe offline, if you wouldn't mind, if you can identify like the address of the
Mhm.
house, and then
Yes.
we'll take that to the Animal Advisory Committee,
Okay.
and they
I
can,
don't want a dog to be put down,
no,
Yeah.
we wouldn't, no.
but it's just maybe a little addition to the fence, perhaps, maybe just some wire up on top of that fence. Would maybe be handy. And make people feel a little more safe, but that's I was surprised. I never experienced that before. And that's all I'm saying on that.
And that, yeah, and that's the kind of thing that I think the Animal Advisory Committee would like to hear about, you know, so that we know before things become
Exactly,
more, before they escalate.
Yes.
Yeah, you don't want that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments regarding the committee reports? Yes, would you mind coming to the podium, please?
You have to go.
Yeah, sorry, the Zoom folks can't hear you unless you're at the microphone.
What was it? The bar?
Dog license, about one county dog license or vice versa. Do I have to have 2 dog licenses?
That's a good question. I'll make a note and find out and get back to you.
What if it's one?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I don't.
Okay. All right, so any other comments or questions for the reports for tonight? All right, let's go ahead and move on then to our staff report and also the Humboldt County Sheriff Department report out. So I'll turn it over to our city manager and then he can win whomever.
Yeah, I don't see the Lieutenant McCall on there.
I don't either.
So if you are on there, just let us know. Otherwise, the city manager's report, first of all, before our next council meeting in July, will be the 4th of July. So we just want the public to know that the 4th is on a Thursday, but we will be open on the 5th, which is a Friday. Also on the 4th. Trinity Street Rehab Project is supposed to begin next Monday, the 17th. Possibly be done by as early as Wednesday, although they indicated the week. And also the week after, they will do striping. However, the entrance to Stagecoach Road will be closed for 4 hours on one of those days, so it will indicate a detour. So we're trying to encourage people that to use Patrick's Point Drive and Anderson rather than Stagecoach. And we're coordinating that with the county also. And then the water tank and pipeline project is continuing on West Haven Drive. And the delays have been running anywhere between 5 minutes to 15 minutes. And the Trinidad Chamber of Commerce will be having their Taste of Trinidad on summer solstice eve, which is June 20th, from 5:30 to 7:30 in Saunders Park. And a variety of local foods and vendors and the band Ponies of Harmony will perform. And then the next chamber mixer will be July 17th from 5:30 to 7:30 at what's called the Secret Beach Retreat short-term rental on Stagecoach Road. And then the Axel Lindgren Memorial Trail, we're working on getting that open again. So we have RCAA, who's coordinating cutting the portion that will be a new portion at the base of the trail. However, the connection to the boulder where Old Palm Beach is has the land bridge to that boulder has a road. So we'll have to have a bridge made to connect them. And GHD, our city engineering firm, is working on that. Van Trail has a separate item under consent. And Trinidad had steps, they're wooden trail steps, which are approximately 19. We're planning on replacing those also through RCAA, and it will be happening probably within the month. And the water plant has experienced, well, we changed the media in the filters, so garnet and sand in the roughing and polishing filters. And then we had some recent rain that disrupted the plant. We also had some issues with AT&T that disrupted the lines there. And as a result, plant itself was turning on and off, but fortunately, we had enough water in the water tanks to take care of supplying the customers. And the main invoice for Coleman Engineering, including a trip here and the work over that weekend, is a total of 14,000. And I did want to add that Pacific Coast Watershed, or Pacific Watershed Associates, rather, they did a flow measurement for Luffenholtz Creek yesterday, and it showed about 10.5 CFS. So that's pretty low, which is good, and that's what we'd like to see. That's all I have.
All right, any questions from the council for Eli regarding the staff report? All right, any, I wanted to comment that the water loss number was really great. 14% is like one of the lowest we've had, so that's really good job by the public works in fixing the leaks and things, so that was really good. Questions or comments from the public regarding the staff report? Please.
This question or comment on the street striping. I know Old Town Eureka, is it gonna include, they just did some striping and they put the striping just where the actual cars can go in instead of leaving it. Sometimes somebody parks here and they park here and there's not enough space for another car. They get more parking on the street.
That's a good idea that we can pass on to GR Sunbird, but the current plan was just to restrike the way it is now. But
So
that's a good point.
Eureka got more spaces by doing.
Mhm. Okay, good.
No, I didn't.
Other,
I didn't appreciate that. And this isn't the kind of loan. I said,
sorry. Ms. Kadlasek, were you making a public comment about the striping on the road? We didn't quite catch it. No, okay, she just was off mute. Okay, all right, let's move on then to items from the floor. At this time, members of the public may comment on things that are not appearing on tonight's agenda. Individual comments are limited to 3 minutes. I will mention that we will have a short presentation from the Civic Club tonight. That'll probably be more like 10 minutes, but it is not an agenda item because it's not action oriented. It's an information transfer and we just couldn't find a good point to do that. Please direct your comments to the council as a whole, avoid personal attacks, and the council and staff responses will be kind of minimal for non-agenda items. Please.
This is the second time I'm going to speak out. I'm here speaking on behalf of my husband, Mike Morgan, former city council member, resident co-owner of Trinidad. This is in regards to the way that I put in everybody's boxes. $1 million boondoggle city manager failures with our water.
That's an agenda item.
Yeah, so.
Is it? There's this public comment, from what I understand. I'm submitting the
Yeah, so just to typically, the public comments in this section are for things that are not on the agenda. Tonight, we will be talking about the water study. Yeah, so what I'll do, Tyler, is as soon as we're on that agenda topic, I'll have you come up and if you can't stay. Yes, I'd be happy to read it in. We'll read it into the public. Okay. Okay. Okay, no worries. Sorry for the.
Check-in, so. This needs to be read in.
Absolutely. One of us will, and all of the counselors have received it. We'll make sure it's on the website as we speak, and then we will read it in the record. Okay, thank you. All right, let's move on then to, I don't know, Jan, if you're. Yes, we're still on. Yes, Jan, if you're ready with your presentation, I think we're ready for you. I didn't see any comments raised.
Good evening. My name is Jan West, and I'm the president of the Trinidad Civic Club. And I have a story to tell tonight. The story of the Memorial Lighthouse tragedy to triumph. It began when the stability of the lighthouse was threatened and ends with the building of the memorial monument in the harbor, a triumph in our efforts to save the lighthouse. This photograph conveys the sanctity of the lighthouse as it stands in tribute to the people it commemorates amidst the crab pots of the working harbor, the perfect setting for a lighthouse. I'd like to introduce the Civic Club leadership team. So if the ladies could please stand. Dana Hope and I serve as co-president, Patty Fleshner, treasurer and club historian, with Katrine Coleman as bookkeeper. Civic Club members have been essential to the project, so please stand if you're here and you are a member. Thank you. All right. The club's partnership with the Terrain Heights Indian community of the Trinidad Rancheria has been truly remarkable. Without their kindness and emotional support, guidance and technical expertise, monetary contributions, and the land itself for the lighthouse, we could not have negotiated this process. We'd like to extend utmost gratitude to Garth Sundberg, Tribal Chair, the Tribal Council, Jackie Hustler-Comerson, CEO of the Rancheria. Wait, Jackie. And Amy Atkins, Executive Assistant. All were instrumental in the success of this project, and we are so grateful to you. The 1949 Memorial Lighthouse was built by the Trinidad Civic Club when the United States Coast Guard decommissioned the 4th Order Fresnel lens and the 1898 fog bell from the 1871 lighthouse on Trinidad Head and presented them to the Civic Club. The new monument will serve 2 purposes. First, to preserve these historic maritime navigational aids, and second, commemorate those lost or buried at sea. The Memorial Lighthouse is dedicated to the memory of 25 fishermen, Coast Guardsmen, pilots, and others lost at sea, and 270 people buried at sea. Each year, more names are engraved for commemoration. The new monument will provide additional space for engraving memorial names to continue serving the community. The story began with tragedy in 2017 when coastal erosion on adjacent city of Trinidad land made it apparent that the lighthouse was in jeopardy. The heartbreaking decision was made to move the lighthouse. A crane from the Reading area was hired to lift the 20-ton lighthouse and the 2-ton fog bell. Low boys donated by the Big Lagoon and Trinidad Rancherias transported them to Trinidad Rancheria Harbor property. The truck began the journey down Edwards Street to the temporary home for the lighthouse. The crane placed the lighthouse on sand without a foundation. The moving cost was over $72,000, including permit fees. The club has been fundraising and obtaining permits for 7 years to provide a permanent home for the lighthouse in Limbo. In all, 12 sites in Trinidad were considered, but the only site offered was the Trinidad Rancheria Harbor property. Trinidad Harbor site also received strong community support during the public meeting to determine its location. After the city permit was approved, the club voluntarily mitigated the design to lower the height by an additional 6 inches and reduce the footprint from 80 feet to 65 feet. Hard part was compiling hundreds and hundreds of pages of documents for various permits. Environmental reports alone, paid for by the Trinidad Rancheria, cost about $32,000. We estimate that the total amount spent on 5 permits, which with required reports and fees, was over $136,000. Almost $31,000 was paid to the city of Trinidad for permits and city planner consultations with Trevor Parker, who helped guide our project. The City Club has been conducting nonstop fundraising since 2017 by organizing wonderful events for the community, selling donated art, jewelry, memorabilia, and other miscellaneous items. In addition to our Memorial Lighthouse Friends donor campaign, the Humboldt community and beyond generously donated funds for this project, including individuals, couples, and organizations, businesses, artists, and musicians, as listed in this 5-page document, plus many in-kind donations to support fundraising events. Direct solicitation campaigns were very successful. Other donors responded to our online appeal during the December Season of Giving campaign for a total of almost $78,000. And there were many more fundraisers, too numerous to mention. The total of direct solicitation campaigns was almost $324,000. Fundraising netted a grand total to date of about $568,500. The events provided great entertainment for the community and a chance to tell the story of the Memorial Lighthouse Project. In the process of asking people to donate money, we learned that the Trinidad Memorial Lighthouse is a beloved icon. Many personal stories we heard demonstrated the love and the passion that led people to donate, sometimes significant amounts of money, because they cared about the lighthouse. We estimate the total projected investment will be over $677,000, including Civic Club and Rancheria expenses, monetary and in-kind donation values. All the bills have been paid, but the projected construction expenses total $8,280 more than we currently have in our account, which means our fundraising will continue for an 8th year. It is really quite astounding that a small group of mostly senior ladies with the co-partnership of the Rancheria has been able to raise this much money. We naively thought that the project would cost about $200,000 to $300,000 when we started. But then COVID arrived, and with it, inflation. We learned that a worthy cause generates dedicated support from a generous community committed to saving the lighthouse. We are excited to announce that the construction initial inspection was today. To complete the project, we will be adding an interpretive sign, landscaping, and a bell chiming system, continuing a lapsed tradition of the bell tolling 12 times at noon in honor of those lost or buried at sea. The city council and staff will be receiving an invitation to our dedication ceremony sometime this summer. So we will let you know. We hope you can all attend. And now some photographs of the beautiful new monument. This is the appearance from the front, showing an enlargement of the stainless steel sign with letters that light up at night. This view from the side shows the 19th century Navy anchor and the wall where future memorialized names will go. Two beautiful benches were donated to provide seating for reflection and meditation. The view from the back shows flagpoles, which will fly the American and Rancheria flags. As stewards of the Memorial Lighthouse, the Civic Club is responsible to the people who entrust us with preserving the memory of loved ones for future generations. In triumph, the 1949 Memorial Lighthouse has now transitioned into a beautiful monument where it preserves the navigational history of the head lighthouse, commemorates those lost or buried at sea, and endures as a place to honor the past and serve as a beacon of hope for the future. We thank our community for being part of this incredible story. Together, we save the Trinidad Memorial Lighthouse.
Thank you for sharing that. We won't do Q&A because it was technically answered before, but we can post the information on the website with contact information in case anyone has any questions and or wants to maybe help out with some of the remaining 8,000 people. All right, any other items from the floor? I just want to make sure I don't miss anyone. These are things that are not on tonight's agenda. Okay, I don't see any online and or in the room. So with that, we will move to tonight's consent agenda. Any changes from the council on the consent? Okay, any public comments or questions or changes on the consent? Mr. Haken.
Hi, Aaron Haken, I guess here tonight is the chair of the planning commission requesting item number 7 to be pulled. So you can have a brief commentary on it.
Okay.
Thanks.
Any other questions from the public on or comments on the consent? All right, bringing it back to the council then, I guess I will go ahead and move them to pull item number 7 from the consent so we can have a brief conversation.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Okay, so I think we'll put that first because I think that's going to be fairly quick. So we will now start. Number 1 will be just a brief conversation about the Van Wyck Trail. And let us know what your questions or comments are on that.
My notes here. Just wanted to thank you very much for doing that. Just wanted to clarify something in here. Thank you for having us in here, Eli. The commentary in here reflects that this is a request to the planning commission. I wanted to clarify for the record, the public, and for the rest of the city council. This is not a request by the planning commission. This was a condition of approval to be placed on the project and on the flow sheet. And that's an important distinction for us on the planning commission because it was very important to us that we wanted this item to be coming in front of you time and time again while this is ongoing. Speaking as a member of the planning commission, it's been very frustrating for us to have things come back to us after long periods of time and expecting us to act on them without having updates for progress. With the Parker Creek Trail closure with Action Lindgren, we asked for monthly updates from our staff, from Trevor. We've been greatly very helpful for keeping things fresh in our minds. We also had a lot of frustration ourselves the night that we approved the closure 3-2. This condition was very important to getting, I think, to the third vote, the third yes vote. So we're not trying to control your agenda. We're not trying to drive what you're doing, but we feel it's important with so many competing priorities the city has that this be full in front of you once a month so you can see something. I'd also suggest perhaps including the report that Trevor gives us every month. I think having those two together would be important because that way we're all reading from the same sheet of music. And that's basically all I wanted to say on that. So thank you.
All right, thank you. Any comments, Eli, that you wanted to make, or was that?
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, okay. All right, that's, we'll move on then to item number 2 on tonight's agenda, which is the County of Humboldt presentation.
Just,
Okay.
did we vote on, I don't think we voted on the consent agenda.
Oh, I apologize. All right, so let's move to approve the consent with those.
Approve the consent agenda.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye, second. Get a second.
Okay, do you have a second? All those in favor? Okay, thank you. Thanks for keeping me on the right track there. All right, so the now second presentation will be the County of Humboldt prioritizing essential services in an era of natural disaster. And we have Sean Quincy and Tom Mattson here to present. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Mayor Kelly, City Council, public city staff. It's a little bit tough to follow such a great effort on the lighthouse. It's amazing to see those things. Try our best. My name is Sean Quincy with the County Administrative Office, working at the courthouse. I believe this is my first time addressing this body, so I just want to introduce myself really quickly, give Tom a chance to introduce himself, and then we'll get into our presentation. I'm originally from San Diego, moved up here in 2002 with HSU. Majored in journalism for childhood, played some football there too. Worked at a couple local newspapers. In the meantime, worked at a couple of preschools as well. Began working at the county 12 years ago in communications, and now my work is dedicated more to budget and policy and some of this work, as well as a lot of work with the CSA field work and doing work with the volunteer fire department and CAL FIRE to work on providing, ensuring that there's some kind of sustainable fire service here. So that's a big part of the job as well.
My name is Paul Mattson. I'm Director of Public Works. I actually came up to Humboldt County kind of just like Sean, when I just you in 1986 to 90 to get my degree. Went back down a couple of years until the job opened. There for a couple of years, and then county in 1998, that's roads, became a director in 2005. You might pick up that Jackie and I work together. So it's good to have that relationship working together, because it's better for all of us involved.
Thank you for that. So our presentation is a little bit to talk about how things we believe have changed fundamentally in our community, and we want to talk about how we got there and some potential next steps. But over the last 10 years or so, we've seen that the number of natural disasters have increased compared to the past. These disasters run the gamut from earthquakes to fires and floods. There's a landslide down at Fulton Creek a couple of months ago. There was the snowstorm a couple of years ago. These are really impactful natural disasters, especially to communities that are the size of ours and in rural communities especially. And oftentimes local governments, the city council, prevent natural disasters. And as you know, proclamation of a local emergency is a proclamation that the local government does not have the resources to deal with this specific situation. Sometimes the state and less frequently the federal government will also proclaim disasters. And what that does, that opens funding channels for local governments in the state local governments in the state to turn on funding to deal with the emergency. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of some of the limitations there, but these natural disasters are taking a toll on the county. Just the frequency that they're happening is different than what we've seen in the past. And they're affecting the way that we deliver public services and our ability to deliver public services. But you've all seen the county's budget woes that we're in right now. A piece of that is as a result of this. And so as we talk about potential next steps, I want to be very upfront with your body, the council, and this community is that a potential next step to help them resolve some of this is a potential local revenue measure, local sales tax measure, likely appearing on the November ballot from the county. There's only a couple of ways to deal with budget issues, as you're all aware, so cut expenses or increase revenues. And increasing revenues is a potential way to offset some of the consider. So I'll go ahead and begin, and we can start. We can stick on this slide here. But the story for us on how we got here begins with the state. Over the last 30+ years, the state has taken more than $500 million from the county's budget. This is not hyperbole. These are actual numbers that are maintained by the office. Back in the 90s, if you remember, the state could not meet its obligations. And so they turned to local governments in this case. They diverted local property taxes to go to state obligations. And that is an annual toll that takes. And we keep track of that money every single year. And this past year was more than $25 million that would have otherwise gone to our general needs. And I don't feel bad about talking about the 90s because this is a local impact that is still affecting local communities. Our infrastructure was created well before this, and we based all of our operations on that funding source. And then the state came in and they diverted it. And we've been trying to stave this off piece by piece. And with extenuating circumstances that we can control, this is taking the toll on us. This is not to also factor in, this doesn't factor in the unfunded state mandates that come every year that I know that this council and the city staff and this community feels, but also the state budget this year, as you're well aware, I'm sure, is in a really bad way. The state's deficit is between $37 and $73 billion, depending on who you ask. And we are in an incredibly defensive position with the state right now, trying to protect against more state takeaways. The governor's May revise a few weeks back proposed hundreds of millions of dollars in reductions to emergency preparedness and transportation funding. These are promises that the state and the governor made years ago that they're now going back on. And so we're trying to protect our community from these funding cuts, that they are going to continue to come. This is how these things happened, how it happened back in the 90s, how it happened in the early 2000s, and we're worried that this is going to happen again. And the more that we look at this, the more that we come to the realization that what we need in order to take care of our local needs is dedicated local funding that can't be taken by secondary. So we'll get on to a little bit more of the details of what this could look like. But we're not the only ones in our community that is recognizing that the county and our community needs to do more to prepare for local disasters and natural disasters. The grand jury issued a report last year. They just issued their third report this year, a couple of weeks ago. But in last year's report, I believe it was in June, they said in no uncertain terms that the county needs to do more to prepare for natural disasters because of our topography, the seismic issues that are around here, because of our weather issues. Climate change is exacerbating the impacts of sea level rise around our community. And the reason I bring up the grand jury is because that is an independent body's local public statement to our local government saying we need to do more. And so our presentation and this effort is part of that effort. And so if I can leave this body in this community with one message is that we believe that natural disasters are an everyday part of life. Or an everyday part of life. We need to reorient the way that we deliver public services in light of this new reality. And for the county government, we're seeing most of the impacts of these natural disasters on our roads. And this slide mentions the need to harden roads. And this is where I'll turn it over to Tom to talk a little bit about that. But the reason we wanted to bring this up is because back to my earlier point about state and federal funding, when they issue emergencies and disaster declarations, that opens up funding, but that doesn't take care of everything.
To jump on what Sean brought about things getting worse, when I started with the county in February 1998, March of that year was the first declared disaster that I operated the system on. What I do and took a look back at history, we were averaging about one federally declared disaster every 3 years. But conversely, every time we had a flood in December, we had an 80% chance of having a flood the same year because of the bad weather coming at us. So living with that was okay. Then we got to 2017. We got hit $41 million of damage in one storm. 2 years later, 2019, we got hit with $15 million of damage. We've had 3 federal, 1 state, and 1 local for a total of 5 declared disasters in the county. 4 for basically 3 for flooding, 1 for a landslide, and 1 for a major earthquake. So things are adding up to outstanding since 2017, about $70 million in the road fund. Running drastically in the red. You may think of FEMA as someone who's going to bail you out. FEMA does not bail you out. FEMA funds we are desperate to have, but I have to fund them first from the road fund or from the Treasury tax collector. And then I have to have a cost share generally from 10 to 15% on every project. And then I have to wait 6 to 10 years to get reimbursed. FEMA does not write you a check up front. FEMA does not write you a check and you do progress on your construction. When there's a declared disaster, FEMA will come out with a declared disaster amount that they're going to provide. 90% of that goes to other local agencies across the United States for reimbursement for prior disasters. Only 10% goes to that current disaster. So we're constantly running behind. How that affects the roads even worse is I have to use my maintenance money, which is about $15 million a year, to fund all of these repairs. That means I'm not doing my maintenance. It means our roads are getting in worse shape. So about 2015, 2016, we were in that blue range with 44 counties. We were holding our own. Now we've dropped down into poor condition. Those 6 counties in the green, those are all self-help counties. They have their own such forward roads. And we are dropping fast. Just learning.
I'm sorry, is PCI, is that the condition?
So PCI about 100 is branded road. This is what we looked like on average 8 to 10 years ago. The system is getting worse. They're not all like this. Some are like the other one on the first slide, and some are just horrible. But the average was in the 60s. Now we're down to an average of 49, and our roads are in poor condition. And the problem with this is the worse condition the roads get in, the more expensive it is to repair them to good shape. That's why we look at that PCI of 70, because once you are above 70, you are at the lowest maintenance cost. It's like repairing your roof before your roof collapses into your house. Our roof was collapsing into our house in the county road system. It's like we're projecting that if we don't need a change in 10 years, we're just not going to have much. Sean from Good News.
stuff back to follow. But this is where we turn to the ask this body in this community. Last year, our board was considering placing a local revenue measure onto the March ballot. And so in the summer, fall of last year, we conducted a scientific survey to gauge the community's interest and find out what their priorities were. And this is what came back, this list of priorities. And as you can see, looking into it, the list of priorities varies pretty much. There's a lot of roles, but there's other priorities like 911 response. There's priorities around homeless services. There's priorities around climate change and providing public transit. And I want to linger on the public transit just for a second because it's interesting in the context of a natural disaster, and we believe that this was elevated to the level that it was in terms of community priorities as a response to, as an action that a local community can take to offset some of the impacts of climate change in the small way that our community can. So it's an interesting one, but the ask here is to weigh in and determine let know what your priorities among these pretty disparate topics here. And so you all likely got a piece of mail, this lovely green piece of paper last week sometime. So that was us. If you're happy about that, or if you're not, you can turn to us. But there's a web address on there for you to go and survey on, some comment. Some people can have more success with it or not, but you can also go to our homepage and take the survey. But this is really important because we need to get really granular because, as I mentioned before, our budget situation is not great, and so we need to get really granular, find out what the top priorities in our community. This is not the only time for folks to weigh in, but the next time to weigh in, you may or may not receive a call because we're going to do another scientific call to really make sure that we can get some scientific result. We'll be doing that later on sometime. The last ask that we would have of this body in this community is that if there are other groups that you think would be beneficial to hear this message or to ask questions of us, please let us know because we are right now to go these very serious and substantial issues, and so to one of the two people who fit. That's what we came here to deliver to you, and we'll be happy to answer any questions.
That's terrific. Thank you. Is there a deadline for the community to give a response on the survey?
Yeah, it'll be open through the end of this month.
End of this month, okay. Does the council have any questions or comments?
Just unfortunate. When you put a local ballot on there, whatever comes with that, how do you guarantee that it's not going to be stolen by the state again? Or I go a week.
One of the benefits of having a local revenue measure is that it cannot be taken by the state. They can come in and certainly go and try to change parameters of sales taxes. That would be a gargantuan lift, in my opinion, for them to do because it would affect so many cities, so many counties, places where these elected officials come from. Anything can be changed in the future, but right now, the way that it's set up, there's some pretty good protections in all the revenue measures like this. Something like that can even affect unintended effects. But in terms of ensuring that the funding goes to the place that it's meant to go, it's important. These surveys are important in that way. That's when we have a resolution to go with the ballot measure. We put in the language that is the priorities that are expressed by the community. This will likely be a general sales tax measure, likely not a special sales tax measure. Last time we polled on this, they came back at around 57%, 58%. That's not enough to hit the threshold for a special sales tax. So we'll wait to see what the scientific polling returns. But if it's a general sales tax, like I said, like the major cities of the O, will be described very clearly the services that are going to be funded. It's money. Let me take a similar approach, and that would be residents of county document our document how those funds should be allocated. And if things don't go the way that residents need, they can say, this is what I voted on, this is what you told me this was going to go for. And if it's not going the way that folks want, then something can always be put on a future ballot to remove that measure from the ballot. It's very, very important that we receive this feedback.
All right, are there questions? Any more from the council? Any other questions or comments? Okay. From the public, are there any questions or comments? Please. Yes, please.
Following the cuts of the county with a lot of interest, and we're noticing that they've been doing suggestions of ways to deal with this. And I'm curious about the scientific poll you're mentioning. In these days, lots of people do not answer their telephones, they screen their phones. They also, many people consider telephone polls, which we've all gotten, scam possibilities. So is your scientific poll include just telephone calls, or does it include other methods? I'd be curious to know.
The question, yes, please.
Okay. No, it's a great question. I appreciate it. The polling that we do is not done by county staff. We don't have the expertise to do it. We contract with a firm that does this type of polling throughout the state, and they've been doing it for a long time. And their methods have evolved with technology and back in 2014 when we went on the ballot. It was primarily, I believe it was all phone, it was all just calls. But since then, they've evolved to doing web-based things, on cell phone, that kind of run again. And I believe their accuracy on results that they turn back have remained. So methods are following best practices by that industry, and I believe their effectiveness has remained.
Thank you. Other questions or comments? Please.
I don't know anything about this, except that California gasoline seems to be the highest that these travel through. And I always thought that a lot of that cost was from taxes to repair the roads. Is that true? And so what's happening to that money?
So there's multiple reasons for California's high gas and gas taxes are part of them. When the gas tax is collected by the state of California, 60% goes to the state of California highway system. That's what you see nice, beautiful highways. The other 40% is split 50-50 between cities and county. The county share is split by a formula that's vastly weighted to registered vehicles with a small component. About average for a rural county, but only have registered vehicles in LA County. And so while we got a little bit of that extra money, we do not get the one share. That's the way it is allocated, puts rural counties at a disadvantage.
Thank you. Good question. Other questions or comments for our presenters? All right, seeing none, then I guess we'll just thank you very much. And unless you wanted to add a final comment, really appreciate you coming in and helping us out.
No, I'll just say thank you for the opportunity. And again, to the homepage on our website, Two that you can just probably taking the issue. This item will likely come back to the board on July 23rd. That's our last meeting before the August deadline to submit comments. I understand that this council is also considering a renewal measure for your own individual revenue measure. So we'd be more than happy to talk with your staff offline about that dynamic with all of our revenue, because I know that the question comes up sometimes about having other revenue measures on the ballot of local cities, a couple of the city revenue measures on. And our response is that we can't, we sympathize with the plight of cities, because as the catch-up effective counties have also affected cities as well. I think there's 16 or 20% of the net effect of that hits cities. So funding that would have otherwise gone to city general funds is also going to the state. And so we sympathize with the plight of cities, and we believe that cities, all communities in Humboldt County need more locally dedicated funding that can be controlled locally.
Thank you very much. Some questions, and
If I may, just real quick,
yes.
Tom mentioned our working together. I've worked with Tom since I became, when I first came to Rancher in 2007. Yeah, worked with Tom and Lupa from 2002, so over 20 years. He does an amazing job. He works hard. He hunts for money. He does everything he can, and he just has such a limited revenue stream and budget. One thing I want to bring up is the new road charge program that the state is looking at. They're looking at it in California and numerous states in the nation, as well as the federal government. So the fuel tax would continue to decrease, and this road charge program would take its place. So and the Rancheria is really interested in, a lot of the tribes are. So we're really looking at that, and I would just recommend that the city look at it, and I'm not sure if Tom has any information on how that's going to affect his budget. But there will be a draft plan released by the end of this month, and we plan on commenting on it. And I'm happy to get you the contact name of the person who's working on it. Her name's Lauren Prohoda, and it is the road charge program. So we need to keep our eye on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I think we'd be like to learn more about that.
Just to know the state's overall plan on that, if it's still in place, the gas tax have been taken seven. I mean, they want to net zero revenue on it, basically. So I don't see how they will.
Okay.
They're looking at charging for vehicle mileage versus per gallon of gas. Because electric vehicles do not pay a gas tax, so they pay a registration fee, but they don't pay the gas tax that other vehicles do. And with everything going electric, there will be no gas tax because vehicles will not be running on gas. Will change over the system.
Very interesting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. All right, I'm going to move us on then to our next agenda item, which is the continued discussion decision on the proposed water rate analysis. And I'll just mention that we had a Samantha Ryan, who's on the Zoom call. She's not able to be here as she was in the last meeting. We went through the, kind of the entire proposal and spent quite a good deal of time on it. So I think this time we're looking at a review of that to agree at a high level, and then we'll talk about a couple of new proposals that have been included. And so I want to turn it over to the city manager, but I do realize that we also will have a lot of public comment on this. So we'll start with the council just to kind of go through newest stuff, I think.
Okay, yeah, so Samantha Ryan with RCAC is online and on the Zoom call. And she can elaborate on these, but basically at the last meeting, we had the 3 rate options. One of them did not entail any contribution from the general fund. The other 2 did. The other 2, one of them kept the inside and outside difference for the rates, meaning that those residents within the city limits would pay a certain amount, and those outside the city limits would be paying 25% more, which was a reduction from what it used to be, which was almost basically like double in the past, and then reduced to 50%. Once we took in consideration the sales tax impacting some of the residents outside the city, it was dropped to 25%. So that's rate option 2, and then rate option 3 was based on meter sizes instead of inside outside. So most of the residents have 3/4 meter sizes, but it also had a 1 inch, 1.5 inch, and a 4 inch, although it was mentioned that maybe that should be a 3 inch. We still, I'm not sure if we can determine if that largest one that we have is a 3 or 4. So since the last meeting, Samantha did add 2 other rate comparisons, which are towards the end of her report. The council had asked one which would be a blended rate, which would combine some advantages of the meter rate and some advantages of the inside outside and sort of lessen the impact on each of those. However, I think Samantha will say that would entail, number 1, more work, so she was unable to present that for this meeting. And number 2, it would also, she wanted to check with the RCAC policies to make sure it was consistent with their policies. Otherwise, she does present a 3A and 3B, which are flat base rate for both inside and outside. One of them is based upon the budget that we used for the first 3 rates. The other one is based upon what's called a revised budget that some of our staff members thought that it would be better to include like about an $80,000 more ballpark for expenses. So anyway, I'll turn it over to Samantha and she can go through this.
I think you covered it all, Eli, but just to say hi to everyone who didn't meet me before. My name's Samantha Ryan. I'm an assistant field manager at RCAC. And so RCAC is a company that serves the 13 Western states and tries to raise the technical, managerial, and financial capacity of water systems throughout our service area. And so I'm kind of the representative from this area. I live in Eureka, California. And so with that, yeah, I'll again kind of just go over what Eli already went over. We presented 3 rate options at the last city council meeting, and there were some current concerns brought up, mainly being that the budget may need to be modified to more accurately capture what the city expects to spend in the next year, because it's sounding like you might have to have contracted operator services for a longer time than expected. There was also discussion that maybe the employee wages may need to be adjusted in order to be able to keep a T3 operator on staff. And then there was also concerns that in-house contracted services, so things like engineering and planning, maybe should be adjusted as well. And then with the grants that you guys are getting, some of the payroll allocations in the budget may not be accurate either. And so I highlighted all of those in the budget that's in the next couple of pages. And then like Eli said, I did produce 2 more rate options for you guys to look at. So one is, they're both just a flat base rate. So whether you're inside or outside, whether you're a small meter customer or a large meter customer, your base rate is the same. And then same with the usage charge, it's uniform usage charge. So it's the same amount per 100 cubic feet. For RCAC to finish out this rate study, really going to need a finalized budget from city council or city staff on what you guys think your expenses will be and whether or not there'll be some sort of general fund gift of $300,000 and a general fund loan of $250,000. And if you guys are still interested in that hybrid option is what we called it last time, I really would have to spend a considerable amount of time with staff looking at the inside and outside cost allocations and meter size allocations. So if you want that, that is still an option, but I would really require a lot of staff time to develop that rate option. And so if we go down to, I guess, what is that? Page 3, again, you can see that all the different rate options that we discussed last time. And if we have questions on that, I'm happy to answer those. But otherwise, there's the budget. And like I said, all the items that city staff mentioned might need to be updated. I highlighted in yellow. And so that's on page 4, 5, 6, and so on. And so the first rate option, 3A, that flat rate option assumes no budget change from the last time we talked. And so everyone would be charged $63.60 as a base rate with $5.85 per 100 cubic feet of usage. This rate option is affordable. We look at affordability of rates. If it's under 1.5%, it's considered affordable by both the State Water Board and the EPA. When you get above 1.5%, you start getting to be a medium risk water system. And if you get above 2.5%, that's when both the State Water Board and the federal government start considering your rates to be unaffordable. This rate option, again, it has that $300,000 general fund gift and a $250,000 loan split out for the last 4 years. And so I tried to keep it somewhat similar to the other rate options that you end up with about $240,000 in reserves at the end of the 5 years. And because you're getting that general fund gift, your first year, you've got some wiggle room in that net cash flow. And then years after that, you're just barely covering your O&M reserves and you're not really funding. Sorry, you're covering your annual O&M costs and you're not funding your reserves much at all. And then for rate option 3B, I did incorporate some of mainly the contracted services. I bumped that number up according to what city staff suggested. And so that makes the rates $66.20 per customer per month for the base rate, $5.85 for the usage. And again, if you look at the affordability of that in that first year, you're at 1.46% for your residential customers, which is considered affordable both by the state and federal government. And then in following years, it does get above 1.5. So you do become a medium risk system, but also medium household income could change. But you never do get above that 2.5%. So that's good news. With this one, because of that budget difference, you kind of see less of a cushion that first year. Second year, you're actually going to go negative a little bit and not cover your annual O&M costs. And you'll actually start kind of saving some towards the end. But again, you end up at about 240. It's a little bit more in this case, $1,000 in your reserves. So I'm happy to answer questions people have. If we want to go back to review the rates from before, we can do that too.
Okay, let's start with the council. I have a number of thoughts and questions, but I want to defer to you guys first and see what you have on your list. Councilor West, it looks like
I'll
you're.
let you go first. I want to hear what you say to follow up, if that's okay, from my point of view.
Well, my first question was a clarifying one about the base rate, cubic feet in the base rate. is there a set number of cubic feet in the base rate, I guess is the question.
0.
0.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's nothing included in the base rate because that's against Prop 218 case law at the moment.
That's what I thought. I just wanted to double check because I think some cities include, I think 100 cubic feet, but. So I guess, so last time, one of the things we discussed is that it's been 7 years since the city has done an increase. There's been a 25% inflation rate. As I look at the revenues coming in, I don't have the exact numbers for this fiscal year, but I believe it's around, going to end up at around 300,000. Yeah. So, and then our costs, if you look across the different models, are running about 637,000 estimated for the next fiscal year. So when you've got expenses of close to 640,000 and you've got revenue of about 300,000, it's a simple math problem, right? That we have to, we're going to have to do one of two things: cut costs or increase revenue. I think my personal feeling is we're going to have to do a bit of both. And to cut expenses, I'm committed to doing something that I think we should have done sooner, and that is to, find a good chief plant operator, T3, and move Coleman out of the water plant contracting business for Trinidad. So, and I think that will save us money going forward. I look at the amounts that need to go up on some of the models, and it was quite high for the meter size differences, which would impact businesses inside the city. We talked about this last time, and it would impact businesses. It would impact the Trinidad school, the firehouse, and the rancheria. I felt that, and my personal opinion is that was an abrupt increase. I don't think that it didn't seem fair to me to have such an abrupt increase in such a short period of time because of the water rate study. And I am kind of a mind that we absorb that. The rancheria, for one, has done a lot of work on the infrastructure at the water plant. They've helped us repair scenic drive leaks, etc. So, and we also discussed a gift from the general fund of 300,000 to make us whole for this coming fiscal year and remove some of the burden from the ratepayers. I think we have to do that because I'm just one person's opinion, so we'll discuss all this. But I think we have to do that because of what I mentioned earlier, the shortfall in the revenue, related to expenses. I'm not big on differentiating inside and outside rates. I feel like it's fair to keep them the same for people inside the city limits and outside. Again, that's my personal opinion. I do see that other cities like, McKinleyville charges 1.5x outside. I don't think Eureka does. I can't find it. And Arcata, I believe, not sure. So some cities do, some cities don't. Because of Prop 218, I prefer to just keep it simple. But anyway, so those are I know it's a lot, but it's a complicated topic. And now I'd love to hear from you guys where your heads are at.
I'll start off. I agree with you in many of the things you talked about. This has been such an unfortunate situation, and I don't think everybody realizes how difficult it was to try to come up with a method of satisfying the state when we lost a T3. So a lot of things that happened that we look back at were unfortunate, including not doing a rate change or looking at our rate schedule when we have the opportunity. But it's tough on us because that means 7 years of time that these rates should have been going up. So we would be able to adjust to it a little bit better than having it all happen at once. But it's hard to get around what happened. We are in a real bad situation. I think we were all surprised by losing someone who was able to do this job and finding it very difficult to replace him, and having to work work around having the state come in and possibly taking over and making this even a more difficult situation. So, the way things happen is unfortunate, but I'm not sure if it could have been done a lot differently. I think something's good. I think we've looked at, our mayor has suggested working harder to get a T3 operator. I think we thought that at some point we could train people and get them into this position and maybe have some local people step up and be able to do this, but it's been harder than we've done. So a lot of things happen that shouldn't have happened. But now we're looking at this and we want to come up with a way that is the best that we can do and try to get this water situation back under control. There will be probably other things we'll be looking at, but right now, I think we have some of the issues are trying to make up for the increases over 7 years of increases that were dropped. We have to make up for that amount of money. We have to try to come up with a way of getting things back to where we're not putting out so much money. And as I was saying, our mayor's coming up with methods, we're all trying to come up with something that we think would work. But we, at this point, the only thing we can do right now is try to get this under control because it's sucking too much money out of the city. The city cannot afford to have it. I think we come up with, thanks to the help of our CAC, we've been able to at least come up with some reasonable ideas. I mean, they're not great. None of us are going to be happy about this. Nobody wants to see these kinds of rate increases. And we've tried to come up with looking at this and see if there's any other way to do things. So it's just unfortunate we don't want to do it this way, but somehow we have to make up the money. We can't let this go. So it's going to be a tough, no matter what we do here, it's going to be tough for a while. So it's not something any of us like doing, and we're going to do the best we can to try to keep it at least reasonable, and that using the general fund money to help us out, we think is a good way to at least keep the costs as low as possible. So certainly something as a member of the council that we wanted to see come up in front of me. We're going to do the best we can. So please understand, we're going to try to make this good. We'd like to hear from you when it comes up as to what these ideas that you think is the most reasonable from your point of view, because we still have to make a decision about which one is the best for us.
Yeah, as you know, I'm fairly new to the city, but when I came in, I immediately heard about what was told to me was the water wars. Apparently, 3 years ago, there were feelings were at a high pitch around what should be done about the water. Whether we should go with the other option of Humboldt Bay, or whether we should stay with our private supply. And you know, personally, I'd like to see that issue revisited, but it's going to be down the road that it's revisited. Right now, we have to deal with what's in front of us, and I concur with what Cheryl and Jack have said. It seems to me, you know, that we're responding to something of an emergency, and we're just simply going to have to work with what we've got at the moment.
Any other comments from the council before I go to public comments?
Yeah, I would love to have all of the options in one slide so everyone could see. And so we kind of discuss the opportunities.
I don't know if there's a way to do that on the fly, but it's in the packet.
Oh, it is.
Yeah, I don't know, Gabe.
We've got these three options up there.
There's three
On this slide, this is the first one, right?
And then
it looks like kind of put together 3A, trying to get them to where everybody can see the spreadsheet would be a little difficult with all of them together. And then there's also.
But we're happy to ask questions and have comments. If you need us to refer back to any of these models, you can pretty quickly scroll back and forth. And then I printed mine out, so I'm happy to share that. All right, I think the council, you know, we kind of shared our thoughts on things, but the main reason, you know, we really want to hear from the public. I don't think any of us have made up our minds, so we want to hear from you also. let's go ahead and open to public comments, and I need somebody to help me remember to read Mike Morgan. Or I'll have staff do that. Okay, public comments or questions about the water rate study.
I mean, it's on the copy of that report.
Would you please, you just want a copy of the report?
This.
Yeah, so the report is in the city council packet. It's on our website, both tonight and then the May 28th meeting is the full report. And then we also put it on the website under things under services, water, and then you can find the report link there. I'm happy to give you a link after the meeting. Any other questions, comments from the public? Let me look online here. I know it's a complicated topic, so we're happy to answer questions or take any, opinions about this.
My name is Janine Volkmar, and I live at 393 North West Haven Drive. I purchased my property in 1983. It's outside the city limits, and that means I've been paying way more money than all you folks sitting there for 41 years. Think about that. There's a real radical solution that just occurred to me while we were talking, and I'm not promoting it, but I'm wondering how you would feel if we suddenly said, instead of the 100 families that are outside the city paying more, what if you did an increase on the people in the city and let the people outside the city at the lower rate? Wouldn't that be a strange idea? But that's not what I'm projecting. So first of all, I want to thank everybody for being here. We could get a crowd theme. So I appreciate the hardworking council and all the people who come to listen. Frankly, a crowd theme is more fun than this, but this is an important issue. So as I said, I live out in the city. I live on Social Security and I'm ready from part-time caretaking jobs. My car is almost 20 years old. My truck is 33 years old. You can see I have a simple life. Although Leonardo DiCaprio did like my truck. It's in the movie. So I live a simple life, but I've been paying more for water for 41 years. And I've been coming to the city council, various city councils, since 2001. I was looking at my file. And all these newspaper articles, agenda items, and so forth, where different budgets were discussed. Every year I would come and I would say, it's unjust to charge 100 families more for water. It's the same water. I was told lots of reasons. Some of the reasons were really amusing. One city councilman who has since died told me that the water had to come further, so I had to pay him. Now think about that. I live a lot closer to the water plant than anybody here. Another person told me that the reason the water costs more is because I pay different taxes than the people in the city. And I want to tell you folks this history because I think it's important to understand where some of the anxiety and the anger and concerns come from. So I called up the county tax collector and I said, do I pay something different because I pay property taxes? He said, no, absolutely not. There's no separate tax. It's the same. And then someone on the city council told me that there was this old bond many, many years ago that the members, residents of the city had to sign and that they would be personally responsible if there was a problem. It would come out of their pockets. No one could find the paperwork from that. I know Gabe looked. And nobody can find this mythical bond. So that's not another reason to charge the 100 families more money. Finally, the mayor, Chi Lin, bless his heart, turned to me and he said, Janine, the reason we charge more money to the 100 families outside the city is because we can get away with it. I was done. Finally somebody told me the truth. And what kind of truth was that? That it was just pure opportunity. And I also need you to know that to hook up outside the city, when I hooked up, was 7,500. And people who hook up in the city hooked up for 4 months. So you can say, oh, well, you're very lucky that you're on the system. And yes, I am lucky. I'm very lucky to have the water. But I paid a lot more to hook up to it. Another issue is that water is a basic need. It's not as if I'm saying, oh, I think I need about 20 more channels on my cable TV. You know, you're laughing because you know I already have a TV. But water is a basic need. It's not something that's optional. So it's time to end this madness, it really is. And I'm so glad to see that some of these reports are showing equitable rates. Our two-tier water system, I've been paying a two-tier water system for 41 years. And if we can change this, I will be a big supporter of rate increases and if they're needed. And I understand that this is a difficult time and needed, but I'm only going to support them if it's equitable. It's about time. So I'm tired of being treated like a second-class citizen. If you want to see why that's wrong, go look in the hallway at the Citizen of the Year plaque. I'm not a second-class citizen. And the people, the 100 families who are paying more money, they're not second-class citizens. So I really urge the council to feel strongly about that equity. I think that's a really good and positive component, and also from a PR standpoint, it's a positive component for increasing rates. You can say, well, we're increasing rates, but at least we're doing equity. So I very much appreciate your time and consideration. You have any questions for me?
No, but thank you. Thanks for your comments. Great background. Other comments or questions? Mr. Hickman?
Okay. Aaron Aiken, I guess I'm here as a water customer and as the PC rep on the Water Advisory Committee. I guess the first question is for Samantha. I want to clarify that with the rate structures that are proposed, I guess all 5 of them now, for each additional 100 cubic foot of use, it's the same rate. There's no graduated system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's the same for inside versus outside customers as well.
Yeah, not exactly. I'm more if I use 100 cubic foot a month versus 1,000, I still pay that same per 100.
So you're talking about use.
Right. Every 100 cubic feet you use, you'll pay $5.85. So most households are going to be somewhere in the like 600 to 700 cubic foot range. Obviously, you'd have to look at your water bill to know your exact amount, but that's kind of what's average.
So I guess just thinking out loud, and maybe this was the last meeting I had to step away from because I tried to attend while I was at work. But why was a graduated or a usage-based system not chosen? It seems to me that by not doing that, we disincentivize people from doing any kind of conservation. There's been a lot of consternation over the fact that simply because I may have a large meter, I'm going to have to pay more. How about if I actually use more, I pay more?
So currently right now, Prop 218 case law does not recommend that you use tiered rate structures. The state water board's looking at regulations to have larger water systems analyze their usage to see if there is a cost difference to the top 10% of water users providing that water. But currently it's against Prop 218 case law because you have to justify your cost, and it's really hard to justify that producing 2,000 gallons is different than 10,000 gallons.
Okay, except that, all right, I hear and I appreciate that. I guess the overall need to produce 100,000 versus 10,000, to me, there's a direct cost increase with that. If you're using more, you have to produce. And then I guess the last comment is just thank you, Samantha, for suggesting that we might need to pay, I don't know if it came from you, but we might need to pay the T3 operator more. And I want to thank the council for finally, I know I've spoken before you many times on this issue, but I feel like we've been stuck on this merry-go-round trying to solve this problem where we come back to the same point, but we make no change in elevation every time, right? We're back to the same thing. We're going to try and hire it in the same way. We're going to be successful. We come back and around and around and around. Very pleased to hear that the acknowledgement, at least from the council, and the desire to try and change the hiring metrics and do something different because my big fear is that we're gonna hire and find this unicorn T3 operator we've been searching for, right, for a number of years now. We're gonna train them. And they're understandably going to realize that they have a skill set that they can go elsewhere with better benefits and better pay. And I don't blame them for doing that. And we'll be right back where we are today, but with no reserve. And so I guess those are kind of, I wanted to get those in there. Thanks.
Yeah, and on that note, you know, that's the reason why we need a bench. So we have to have the T2s on the bench, basically, as it's called. So that we don't end up in that same situation. And we did discuss the tiered water rates, actually, because a lot of us are fans of those, to keep, you know, the higher users maybe would pay more because they're maybe, you know, watering things maybe they shouldn't water or something in during a drought. But we were, yeah, cautioned against that. So other questions or comments? Please, Paul.
There is some incentive. We uses less water, you know. Rate for every 100 cubic feet, if you use fewer plantings of cubic feet. So there is some incentive.
That's true.
So I recommend 3A or 3B.
Yeah. Thank you. And yeah, 3B was just, you know, an understanding by staff that maybe the cost might be higher than we had thought. So we're gonna have to think that one through. Other questions, comments from the public? Oh, please.
Very Maxwell. And I'm new to this, and I did a lot of studying this afternoon from the packet. I guess what you mentioned tonight about commercial, don't we have to more substantially? That's what I'm not. Like 2 businesses use water. And if, you know, like PG&E, we can't get around peak off peak because you're. But if our rates go substantially, chance revenues will go down because, you know, we have to raise our, and then our sales.
That's a good point. Thank you. I need to read Mike's public comment into the record unless staff wants to do it. Well, thank you. I have a copy here. Do you guys want me to do it or do you want to? Okay.
That's cute. Whatever.
Why don't you do it? And because I need to make a comment about it, and so it would be odd for me to make a comment.
And yes, I was just gonna say, as mayor, if you could pause Davis's reading and then just correct anything that's.
This letter is from resident Mike Morgan, former council member, resident owner of the Trinidad Day Bed and Breakfast. It's titled $1 million Boondoggle City Manager Failures with our water department. He suggested there be a no rate change option presented. In this option, city manager Eli Napa is held responsible and finally fired. That's what Mike says here. Water department operation.
And just as a point.
Is that where you want me to
Yes.
interject? So I just want to make it clear that from a personnel perspective, the council has made no decision to quote unquote fire or terminate the city manager. We will be talking later about the city manager voluntarily retiring because it's just time, and we've been talking about it for months, and he, yeah, we'll talk about that more then, but I did want to point that out.
He goes on to say the water department operating reserves replenished at 300,000 from our general fund. New guardrails and protections put in place so that no future council or manager can use it for studies or drought ever again. Until the council and staff completely sort out the staffing and water department monetary requirements, the general fund continues to subsidize ratepayers who did nothing wrong Ratepayers should not be forced to cover the previous council and Eli's $1 million boondoggle. Schedule a new rate study with GHD, which is our engineering firm in-house, after staffing is complete and an investigation audit is complete. In the audit, we need a complete timeline, rate increase criticisms, and results of both previous rate studies, including resident letter protest votes. We can and should do better. Mr. Morgan suggests here, city governance suggestion. Staff reports the amount of money these 4 managers in a dozen years, acknowledging Karen Suker's success, have cost us. We go back to what worked for 100 years. Council members directly managing departments and governance, saving and replenishing some of our wasted money. If the city decides to hire a new city manager, it must hire a fiscal conservative who has proven track record. The hiring process must not be rushed. Create a new position and compensation for our city clerk. This would easily get us through a year or 2 of council governance. Thank you for your time and consideration.
All right, and thank you, Mr. Morgan, for your letter, and we appreciate it. Appreciate that you're taking the time to share with us your thoughts, and we'll talk more about personnel things as we go through budget and so. All right, I would like to, at this point, I think, bring it back to the council for consideration of the different rate models. I mean,
I might as well get started on this.
Yeah, go for it.
I've listened to the people who are concerned about paying higher rates outside the city. We put this together, at least the 3A was put together to try to balance that. And I kind of liked the way we did it. I think it means everybody in the city would have to pay about $4 more. But that's what equalized things. So now everybody pays the same amount. So I lean towards 3A as I think a good idea. 3B. I know we might be taking a risk, but I'd like to see us keep the rates down as much as possible. So that just puts a few more dollars in everybody's pocket. So I think 3A would be what I would think is a good way to start. At least I think that would work for us.
I tend to agree. One thing I wanted to mention is that we talked about the the transfer of 300,000 from the general fund to the water fund. But we have also talked about a loan from the general fund to the water fund over the next 4 years of another 250,000. In an ideal world, we would get our costs under control and we wouldn't have to do that. But
do the second one.
Yeah, well, we wouldn't. The second one is just higher costs all up. But both of these models, 3A and 3B, have an expectation, correct, Eli, of the $250,000 loan for the subsequent year.
Yeah, that's on the line.
That's a big comment.
Yeah, they're both 3A, 3B, and assume a $300,000 gift and a $250,000 loan. And I will say that the difference between 3A and 3B really comes down to your budget. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that you're making a decision between 3A and 3B. I was giving you the difference of if you were to change your contracted services from $62,000 in FYE 2025 up to $140,000, which is what staff recommended after the May 28th meeting. And so that was just to give you an idea of what that looks like. So I don't think that you should necessarily be selecting 3A versus 3B right now. That's going to come down to any sort of budget revisions that come into play because they're really the same rate structure.
So we could select the number 3 option, but the A or B part is yet to be determined.
Yeah, you'd have to. I would need finalized budget numbers. So if you're wanting to include a higher amount to have a T3 operator, if you're wanting to have certain number of years with Coleman Engineering still while you hire on a T3 operator, that's going to affect the rates. So all these actual rates are really draft rates until I get a finalized budget, and whether or not you are doing the general fund gift and loan. But right now it's assuming you are.
I have a question, so maybe I'm not following this, but 3A and 3B are they separate items, or are they associated with number 3?
Yeah, that's a confusing part, is it just ties to attached R in this just update on page 2. It says attached R, number 1, the initial rate options, number 2, the budget, and then number 3. So it references that. They're not actually attached to the previous
So should we
rate option 3. So I apologize for that confusion.
So 3A actually looks at the number 2 rate that you gave us and just equalizes it. Is that right?
Yeah, you could look at it that way.
Yeah, so it's like proposal number 2, but
separate
equalizing inside and outside.
So if we say, we're not going to say option 3, we're going to say 3A or 3B, depending on something we look at later. As a separate item. If we were to vote tonight, say this is what we want to do, we would be voting then for 3A or 3B, depending on what we look at later. Is that right?
So go ahead, Tim.
Oh, I was just going to say, I still have to produce a final report. And I'm looking for guidance on which rate options you would like included in there. So you're not having to make a decision tonight. But all the numbers that you see are at this point somewhat preliminary rate options, dependent on what you guys finalize your budget at.
So I would kind of like to make a decision tonight if we can. And so 3B is saying we're going to spend more on Coleman and some other costs than the staff originally submitted to Samantha. So but all of these assume the 300 transfer plus the 250 loan.
And there's no increase for a T3 operator also, just to FYI.
Right. I was going to ask that question. So, I mean, so Gabe and I are kind of looking at each other on that one, because I think the T3 operator is already built in, is it not? Or would we need to bump it up? We have a T3 and 2 T2s, I thought, in the model.
Yeah, the budget that we currently have set, let's just say for tonight to approve, totals around $520,000. The budget that Samantha has proposed in the rate study is around $555,000. So they're really close.
Yeah.
Samantha's about 25,000 over. The difference, we don't have a fully funded, whatever it might cost, T3 built into our budget. The idea was, if we get that, well, then the money that we have set aside, which we did bump up in Samantha's budget to 140,000, and that includes the contracted services that we discussed at the last meeting, we bumped it up to reflect reality for next year. Then in theory, it's a swap. You know, as Coleman comes in, as we hire a T3 and we're able to get kind of wean off of the contracted services that we have now, it would be a wash. So,
and then it would be more like 3B, and then it's a T3 professional versus Coleman, and maybe we get the cost down in addition to that.
Yeah, and I think Samantha has the numbers for contracted services going down to a point in 2028 where that number wouldn't reflect the true salary of the T3. So we'd have to sync up our budgets just a little bit, but we're getting really close. We're very close. And I would say that $555,000 target of this year is very close.
Okay. Yeah, and I don't want to push, I didn't want to push too much on making a decision. It's just that I know that we're hemorrhaging money, to be blunt. And so, expenses versus revenue. So I just wanted, the sooner we can make decisions, the sooner we can make adjustments, transfer money and become whole again. So just my thought. Would anyone like to make a motion or ask more questions?
So I'm not sure what the motion we're looking at would be. It doesn't sound
I
like.
think, if we were gonna make a motion, I think it would be a motion, something like,
Continue the study.
that we would like to accept the water rate study model 3B with the understanding that, should Coleman Engineering move off 100% and we replace with a T3, those costs could actually go down some. And then the rates would not increase as much in the subsequent fiscal years.
I take that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't laugh, but okay.
So if
Did
the
anybody
costs go
touch
down,
on that?
we could review.
I
the
mean, I would
costs in
think
subsequent
so,
years.
right? If we can get the cost down, I don't see why we couldn't just plug that into the model and just not raise them as much, right?
In subsequent years. but
In subsequent years.
This year,
Right, this year I think we're
I'm ready to vote on it.
And then, by the way, the only other thing is the 250 loan from general fund. If we could really reduce costs, we wouldn't have to do that. And that would be, to me, that would be ideal, but I don't know if that's possible. So I think we had a second. I don't want to rush you guys on. Do you want more time? No, okay. Okay, all those in favor? All right, okay.
So basically, just to
Staff.
make it clear, so that's 3B.
Yes, so.
What you voted on.
Yes, so 3B with the understanding that the council is, and we have discussed this a number of times at WACN and the council, and for various reasons, we hadn't been able to find a T3 chief plant operator. We would like to do that. We'll put out our best efforts working the council with staff. If we can reduce costs, then maybe we won't have to raise it in the subsequent years. That's our dream. That's our
The difference may also be absorbed by increased salary for the T3.
Potentially, yeah. What we need to do to retain, to your point, Katie, to pay a decent, wage and so forth.
And if nothing else with 3B, if you happen to have more money, you can have it go to reserves.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right, which we need to replenish. Very good point, yes. Okay, thank you, council. Thank you, members of the public, for your attention and thoughtful questions. It's really helpful. All right, so with that, we are going to move on to some related resolutions. The first is 24-12, authorizing a one-time general fund transfer of $300,000 to the water fund, and 2024-13, recognizing water fund reserve status and updating 2017 and 2020 fiscal reserve policies to align with water rate update targets through 2029. So turn that over to staff and then we can go from there.
Yeah.
So, I don't have beautiful presentation material that we had from Ms. West here tonight. And from the county, but I spent a lot of time this last several weeks just really trying to wrap my head around the fiscal implications of the general fund transfer that we've decided on, which, well, we haven't decided, we programmed into this particular agenda item. This agenda item is on the council's, before the council tonight to adopt the fiscal budget, to authorize a one-time transfer of $300,000 to the water fund for the emergency budget stabilization. As Mayor Kelly said, to recognize our reserve status, which right now is 0, and update our current policies, which all of our current resolutions from 2017 and 2020 all define a specific number and what that reserve is. So they're basically null and void as they stand. So in the packet, I'll just, I want to cut straight to the chase in some regards, because we've had two meetings on the 14th of May and the 28th, where we really drilled down to what our revenues are, what our reserves look like, what they're there to do and why we have them. We see a very healthy general fund with a roughly a $2.4 million reserve, but then we watch the water fund essentially become depleted very quickly. So it was a good lesson, not a lesson that I want to repeat, but it's a good lesson in how quickly $1 million can disappear. And with $2.4 million in the current general fund, the general fund doing, it's building like it's supposed to. The water fund on the other hand needs a lifeline. So at these two meetings, we discussed the anatomy of the city's budget, the documents that we use to review and manage the city's money from behind the scenes. On the May 28th meeting, we talked about the reserves, and we share a current staffing plan, which now I believe we've got clear direction that we're going to look for a T3 operator along with a city manager now, as we found out today, or we will find out in an agenda item or two. So we've got some staffing challenges ahead. On the screen, I'm trying to bring up a lot of words that I put in probably one of the longer prefaces to the pages that make up our budget. And I did that because I want to point out that the city's budget is a legal document. And it's a legal document that governs how the city council, based on public input and your purpose as council members to oversee the city's finances, expect the city to perform throughout the year. And as a legal document, you can use it for accountability. The public can use it towards your accountability, but you can also use it towards staff accountability. And by having as much included in this 4 or 5 page or 5 or 6 page preface, I think with the turnover and with a new city manager possibly coming on board this fall, I thought it would be a nice, thorough tool to kind of really mark this place in time, how we got here, so that in one place, hopefully a new manager can read it and get caught up to speed and understand what your expectations are for this fiscal year. And hopefully, this might carry into the next. So some of the priorities that I programmed into the pages of the budget by allocating money for are up as bullet points in the in this document on the screen. It's number 1, to invest in maintenance and upkeep of the town hall and the recreation assets such as trails and parks. Number 2, CERT program funding. We've got $3,500 programmed in the fire department budget for CERT funding. We've established a reserve committed. Well, we've proposed a reserve fully committed for underground utility. That's something that I've been hearing for years. And I think that it's something, the council's got a big uphill road to determine who gets the priorities, which poles are gonna come down and which aren't. But I think that can be described in detail later. But for right now, if we make a reserve fund with our general funds, and I'm proposing tonight to seed it with $50,000. But it can be less or more based on the bottom line that I'll be showing you in terms of our budget summary. Prioritizing a strategy to recruit an in-house T3 chief water plant operator. Prioritize developing a staffing plan and salary schedule in accordance with the employee policies and procedures that align staff responsibilities with wages and the needs of the city. So focusing on the transitional stability of the water fund. Water department is also a huge priority for this year. And this budget might need to be considered a good, solid working draft that we come back to mid-year. And really determine, I say mid-year, I mean December, we'll know what the fate of the sales tax is at that time too. So there's a lot hanging in the balance. And as Sean Quincy said tonight, having several tax measures on a ballot could have adverse effects on on other local agencies. Now, I think our population here, our voter base voted, I think it was an overwhelming 64 or overwhelming, but a 70% last year or 3 years ago for the current sales tax. So I think we have a pretty educated community and tax base that could, hopefully, a county measure might not counteract the city's measure, but don't take anything for granted. So here's what I've described to be our revenue projections in the general fund. The general fund revenues include sales tax, occupancy tax, and fees for services, property taxes. We're looking at about $923, or $900,023. And then our operating expenses, I'm proposing to be at $960,000, which is a difference of about $36,000. Now, I brought up the point at a previous meeting, I think it was the May 28th, we talked about reserves. The city's general fund has been parking about anywhere between probably an average of $175,000 a year in reserves. And that's perfect. And that's exactly almost what the water fund is planning, hoping to generate in reserves moving forward. So the city's general fund is doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. So when I see a number like 36,000, it doesn't bother me at all. Spending a little bit in the deficit mode, I wouldn't necessarily call it deficit because in the last 5 or 6 years, the city's put into its reserves 5,000. So in this document, I talk about sales, or I talk about the revenues that the city receives, a little bit of a background on the revenues and why they're so volatile. Sales and occupancy taxes are considered to be very volatile revenue resources. Property taxes are strong, they're consistent, they're the same all the time. They increase a little bit here and there depending on turnover of houses and reassessments, but for the most part, the sales and occupancy taxes are pretty solid. Occupancy taxes have gone up because this last year we did an increase from 8 to 10 or 8 to 12%, which more 10 to 12%, but that has proven to be robust. I think the overnight stay nightly rates are significantly high right now. I think the vacation rental market is still pretty good. At least I think it's going back to its 65-35% occupancy in Trinidad. I think during its peak after COVID, it was almost like 75%, which is huge. But I think we're kind of leveling out to our pre-pandemic occupancy rates. I have a chart here about that describe those revenue sources in terms of how they look on a pie shape. As you can see, sales taxes are the lion's share, property tax and occupancy tax make up the other, percentage. Revenue priorities. I have provide detailed support and analysis of sales tax revenue leading up to the November election. I think that's. And I missed the word, provide detailed support and analysis. That is to council members or anyone that would like information who are either proponents or objectors to that sales tax. I think it's important and incumbent on the city. Staff cannot advocate for tax measures, but council members can, public can. So I think it's important and incumbent on the city staff to be providing good and accurate information so that that information can be distributed by whoever, is either fighting for or against the sales tax. We need to update our building department fee schedule, and I'm actually really excited to say that that's on tap, hopefully for July. And this has been part of like a revenue optimization process that the city's been really behind on, as we know with our water rates. We're now looking at doing that across the board. We did it with our occupancy tax. We're going to do it with our building department fee schedule, hopefully this year. And we're going to also update our cemetery plot rate. So those are things that we can do to maximize and also do a lot of other things, like the cemetery plot rates are low, and that's causing a run on our cemetery from people out of the community. And it's just really, it's a really bizarre thing, but I guess, water flows downhill. If we're the cheapest cemetery rates around, I mean, I think a lot of people really enjoy Trinidad for not just the trails and not just the restaurants and beaches, but I think their kids might say, well, I might go visit mom if she's up there in Trinidad for coffee, and I'm not gonna I'm not going to Eureka. You know, so Trinidad's kind of around the area.
Wow.
So it's made an impact, and it's something that we need to address. We need to monitor our reserve and cash flow needs in a manner that maximizes interest earning potential. That's something that we have been doing. And it's made a difference. We got quite a bit of interest earned this year. So our auditor used to tell me all the time, he's like, are you rich enough to not, make sure that your money is making as much money as it can? And I was just like, no. And he's like, well, you shouldn't be letting the city slide on that one either. So investments are key. And also analyze and recognize the fiscal impacts of the harbor fee to property, fee to truck status. I think we still are gonna embark on that discussion here with the Rancheria, maybe in the government to government meeting coming up. It's a kind of discussion.
I know that's Jack and Cheryl. We were told today by Jackie that it will be on Thursday from 2 to 3, or 2:30 to 3:30.
Okay.
Yeah. So I said,
Yeah.
2:30 to 3.
I'm just talking here because I want the council to have some confidence in it, for at least from a budget strategy perspective, because I know you're not just a lot to digest. But I'm just gonna go over a few more things and I'll let the public, and the council more about what we want. So the reserves, I had in here, some situations of examples of how the city is going to use its reserves this year. How important these reserves are to providing, short-term insurance. This kind of like the shield from sudden misfortune. We're using it to stabilize the water fund budget. And I think it's important to talk about these reserves because in terms of the sales tax coming up, we need to have a pretty good understanding of how that sales tax money has been so important to the city. We're going to transfer money to bail out the water fund. That reserve fund is to maintain public buildings and city assets. They will be used this year. Provide salary incentives to encourage employee retention and increased responsibilities. To cover increasing costs due to state and federal mandates, and provide cash flow needs during peak grant project outflow demand periods, which is like right now. We've got a lot of money going out for this tank pipeline project, and luckily we're not working with FEMA because it takes years to get FEMA money. Well, working with the state, it can be pretty hard too because they're sticklers up there at that reimbursement level, and we're experiencing some delays in our invoices being approved. So having that cash flow is really helpful to the city, a small city like this, who has a $2.4 million reserve and a $5 million project.
Again, how big are the reserves?
2.4 million. Yes, general fund, discretionary money.
And is it invested so that if we draw on it, we have to, cash stocks in or something?
Well, exactly. We have it in a fund, it's a state fund called LIFE. And it's very liquid, real fast when we need it, but it's a state investment pool. It's huge. And you can look away and feel good. And that's what we need because we're not money managers. We do have money in our checking account, which is a new sweep account that Eli set up, which is now interest bearing in the same range as money market accounts. So while we're having these cash flow needs where we might have $1 million sitting in our checking account, it's FDIC insured and it's earning it. So that's key. So, and to develop a program committed to save for future underground utility projects. I've heard that a lot. It's about time I actually get it up. Sweet, right? So, so some of the expenses, I have the expense narrative by detailing here, starting with the admin fund. Then we go into public safety and cops, fire, and we have public works. So those are funds that lie within our general fund main food groups, let's just say. And that's what our discretionary funds pay for with offsets from grants. So some of our priorities in the admin fund are to cover the wages and benefits for 2.8 full-time equivalent employees. And the city manager has determined that there would be a 4% cost of living adjustment applied across the board to all the employees this year. That fund covers the attorney, planner, building inspector, accountant, auditor, and tech support. It covers utility costs for public buildings, town hall, annex, and library, which the city pays pretty much most, if not all, the bills for the library, I believe. Maintenance and utilities. Office supplies, equipment, and Aaron's gonna like this one out there in the audience, technology improvement to enhance the audio quality of the meeting. So I want to put the stuff in writing, so we have a good road. You know, it's really useful, because we can all say this stuff in meetings and then we go away, it's like buried in minutes. Well, now we're gonna keep this up front with us on a regular basis. I use it to measure our success every couple of weeks and months. Website, municipal code, record keeping, those are important things that the general fund pays for, and the community group support from TOT, which we, by the way, paid for today as part of the consent calendar. We're issuing checks to all the community groups.
Thank you.
So public safety, this is a good one. This is some really good news for the city, and this is going to help relieve some of that burden on the general fund. So public safety, we learned this last meeting where the contract was updated?
Yeah, last meeting updated, and this meeting is the animal control.
So the county did, and I gave Mandy over in Blue Lake some props in this paragraph, because it was really her doing. Basically, Blue Lake was faced with a contract increase based on some population calculations that the sheriff did. It was faced with a cost that they just could not pay for services. So Mandy and Blue Lake just really made a big stink about it and got the attention of the sheriff's financial department and maybe even some of the board of supervisors. And they did a recalculation, which has reduced both Trinidad and the city of Trinidad's cost. And that calculation, I think, over last year, Eli, was like 100 for contract costs.
Oh, it was like 230.
Okay, so it was like 230,000 the city was expected to pay in contract costs, which now has been reduced to $67,000.
Yeah, the reason is the formula they use the formula for the population for Blue Lake, and they use the formula of one deputy and their benefits for us. So they were called on that to, pick one or the other. So fortunately, they picked the population one, and Blue Lake got a little bit lower, and we got a lot lower.
And that means that we've already paid this year. I think the city had already paid quarterly contract fees of well over $100,000. So they're going to be issuing a refund check to the city for $45,000, which with all the county's budget was, I don't know how the heck they pulled this off, but it's very beneficial to Trinidad. And just to kind of put this in perspective, public safety, with Gene Bass and his Pacific Coast Security contract to provide 1,040 hours to the city, which is essentially half time at $45 this last year. The city was not only going to have to not only pay all of its COPS funding, which is grant money that comes from the federal government it's trickled down through the county and state. Trinidad receives about 150,000 of that every year, and it's been very steady for the last, probably 7 years. So I don't have any reason to believe it's going away anytime too soon. But $150,000 now is going to cover all of our contract with Sheriff, all of the contract with Pacific Coast Security, and all of the animal control, shelter, and control for service agreement, leaving the city with a slight amount of money to reserve for later rainy days.
Great.
So the city will not have to be dipping 100,000, 200, 150,000 into the general fund. So that's where the teeter-totter sort of equalizes. So we don't have to use that money for public safety, but because cops paid for it, but now we put it back in the general fund, and I look at it, we're paying 300,000 to the water fund to bail it out. So I mean, all the money is is equalizing in a really nice way for Trinidad. So it's like on one hand we get really bad news, and on the other hand we get the good news. So again, the general fund really helped. So fire department. Well, I'll go back to public safety. If there's a decision made by this council, if the community feels that, hey, we want Gene here and he can afford to be here. We want him here 2,000. We ain't have the ability to do that. And I think we've had some luck with Gene. I think the community is very responsive to Pacific Coast Security, and not only that, but having the boss here. I mean, it doesn't get any better than that. The owner and the boss of the company is covering Trinidad.
Yeah.
So there is no, we don't have to call the boss and say one of his employees are doing right or wrong. He's actually been a real nice asset to the city. So fire department is going to get the CERT $3,500 boost for a program. I think, what do we call it? Program trainings and maybe other.
Some of the CERT stuff, right? The community emergency response.
Miscellaneous. It's amazing. It's kind of just a miscellaneous $3,500 for whatever the program coordinators feel is necessary.
Yeah.
And I made a note in here too, is in italics, it's important to note how the city's investment in public safety benefits the community, I think, as a whole. So when it's the county or the outside city versus city discussion comes up, I mean, those sales tax dollars do trickle and benefit, I believe, the outside city residents in several ways. And sometimes it's hard to articulate that, but in our budget, I think it's a great opportunity to do that. And this is one example, because I think we're also paying for some ham radio improvements, which will help on the fire hall, which will help the city in emergency. Public Works. What's changing in Public Works this year, probably more than anything, is that last year we had a grant payroll allocation, and I have it in parentheses, otherwise known as grant payroll allocations. These are offsets in employee labor. So when we have these big projects, the grants have been programmed with funds to offset the employees' time spent in these grants. So when Mercer Fraser breaks a water line, we have to send our crew out and respond, and now dedicate the rest of the day, taken away from cutting the trails on Trinidad Head, now monitoring the plant. All the tanks are fluctuating now because we have a huge water leak. There's money set aside for that. This year, 95,000 last year was plugged into the, offset in the general fund. But this year it's only about 28,000. So the general fund's going to have a higher wage for this year for Public Works employees. But I listed also in here some of the priorities: right away and ongoing trail maintenance. And these are not reserve funded things. This is just what our budget generally pays for. The current budget that I'm proposing. City engineers' expertise on general public works projects, representation on technical advisory committees, regional transportation discussions that city benefits from, and also assistance with funding allocations distributed by state and local agencies. If I need to know if money's coming from some different source at the state level, I just call Josh Wolf and he tells me right away. Public building and facility maintenance, and then we're going to put that. We're proposing 50,000 in seed money. You can see how that 50,000 in seed money, if I reduce that in half, well, our $36,000 general fund deficit, let's call it, would be down to 10. So really, it's and again, I totally would recommend that. I don't think it's bad for the budget to have that $36,000 negative, and I think it's probably nice to see a substantial amount of money in the undergrounding fund to show the seriousness of the council to actually put some. And now we're talking about the water. So I spelled out in this document hard costs versus, I define hard costs versus soft costs. So hard costs are basically the things that are, is it our base rate in our water fund? Is that how Samantha described it? The base rate that we all pay is in theory there to cover keeping the lights on, right? The consumption charge is part of that rate structure that pays essentially for ongoing capital improvements, so savings. So in this particular case, our hard costs are covered in the water fund budget, but our soft costs are technical and engineering time that goes to consultants. That's the part that's out. So I listed in here, I had a slide at the last meeting where we lost $1.1 million essentially in capital improvement reserves. I listed the years in which those funds started to really draw. And again, I'm just such an advocate, and I think Patty, as a historian for town, can understand how having these things in one place in one document can help guide us later. And I think with a new city manager, whatever the situation may be, having this in front of them will be really helpful to tell the story of how important it is to get out of this. We can, which Mayor Kelly has given us practice today. Let's see. So some of the priorities: budget alignment and staffing plan developed into a 5-year rate study. Staff wages and benefits for 3 full-time equivalent employees with a cost of living determined by the city manager. That's plugged in. I also note that I'd like to suggest, and the council can weigh in on this, restrict spending right now to only projects vital to delivering quality drinking water to customers, and current grant projects in progress until the fund is stabilized. Projects outside of that scope should be brought to the council for review and authorization on a case-by-case basis. And those are things like some of the projects that we started with, the upper watershed review to see if we can come up with more water, which we still need to do, but I just don't, without the money, it's really hard to just let the count go into red. So if we want to bring back a project, I think it should be weighed for its priorities, and the council should have the opportunity to say, this is totally worth going deep develop and implement a recruiting strategy to hire an in-house T3 operator. That's critical. And upon the adoption of this budget, we will also be hiring our first, well, I should say our second now, licensed T2 operator. And the money is in the budget because we just, believe it or not, because we have reduced the number of staff recently. We had a member leave us, and that money was already programmed for a licensed operator. Well, now you'll be basically acting tonight, authorizing this person a month in advance of the July 1st date. And again, the sooner we get a T2 operator, distribution license operator on board, the better. So this will authorize the local halftime on his way to a T3, hopefully, under T3 supervision, hopefully, if we can hire. And then consider preparing for a $300,000 loan from the general fund of the water fund. That's a big one. And I think I learned tonight, I was confirmed tonight that the loan is actually programmed into the rates. We haven't unprogrammed it from the rates. So it is something that we have to brace for. And I think I found a couple of other funding sources that we could augment that by using that loan money. Specifically, that I don't want to get too much in the detail right now, but we received a bit of COVID money. And the federal government under Biden has expanded the eligibility and use for that money. To the tune, and I think we have about $78,000 sitting in a fund after our most recent audit or reconciled statements that we can use possibly to instead of the 250. So
that'd be great.
Almost in conclusion here, the staffing plan and wages. So I'm lifting what I think is a good space in time right now to say that this is what the budget costs, and these are the staff roles that we're currently utilizing. Not too much to see here other than the staffing priorities. And the staffing priorities for this year are going to include city manager recruitment, develop a recruitment strategy to hire a T3 operator, conduct annual evaluations and maintain accurate personnel files and training requirements. I think that's something that we could use a little improvement on. I think we get that in place. I think it'll help all the employees about their longevity, their advancement. Develop a staffing plan and a salary schedule. That would be helpful too, especially with an in-house T3 coming on. I think that's studying on the seat. what does a T3 operator earn? His environment, and then I also noted that we might want to have a freeze on hiring for unclassified positions. Not forever, but just until authorized by the council, because we did some interviews recently for Public Works and we came across someone with a pretty incredible resume. We just don't have the budget yet ironed out, and we don't have a job description. It was a little bit like, we like you for this, we like you for that, we like you for this, we can totally put you to work, but our policies and procedures say that you need to actually develop a job description before you hire somebody. That's kind of a helpful thing, right? So I think that's something that we could, as a priority, but any of these things I'm open for suggestions. And then I got a more of a bird's eye view of our budget voting summary on this page. I think ultimately 300,000 reserves are going to be used to help stabilize the water fund. We've got a sales tax election this year, which you're going to be kind of on pins and needles on. Hopefully it pans out like I think. But if there's anything else missing, if we wanted, we can go through the summary pages. If you want, we can talk about the resolutions. If there's anything in the resolutions that are before you that you feel need to be edited or amended. But for the most part, or all the pages, which I'm just kind of scrolling through right now, which are very detailed and probably too much for this meeting unless there's a specific line item that catches your attention. But ultimately, I think the summary is probably the most effective way to look at the budget. And here is what it looks like in your packets. And when I say 923,732,000 is essentially your spending package, of course, that doesn't include grants. We still have a lot of grants in progress. But I include cemetery plot purchases, franchise fees from Humboldt Sanitation, and then any transfer in from the TDA fund, which we currently have a very healthy reserve in too. So there's ways to balance the budget right now as is. But I think what we're seeing here is the most effective way, in the most responsible way to show it, by showing the $35,000 as reserve spend. I can transfer money in from TDA, which I think we have $100,000 in reserve for public works labor, but I think that money also is eligible for street projects. And I don't want to take away money from a street project just to balance the budget. You know, I think it would be better to hold that until it's absolutely necessary. So that's why, again, I put transfer in as a all down for me. But the expenses then, general fund admin, public works, fire, police, cemetery, waste management. The law that says you have to balance the budget, you know, you have to have a perfectly balanced budget. You have a reserve, it's your right to do what you want with that reserve. And the KUKA ordinance that we just adopted, the construction force count, cost accounting measure, I think that was effective June 28th. So we can start using some of the reserves on the town hall this stuff. And hopefully the tennis.
Yeah.
So, which really, and the Civic Club. Fine. So, I don't know, I'm open to hearing anything.
We're sorry, your conference is ending now. Please hang up.
Oh.
Somebody on
Yeah, so really good. I think hopefully all the counselors have had a chance to scan through and formulate any question. I actually having it at the outset, I thought it was pretty, so it was, you know, you did a great job of explaining it. It was very thorough and similar to last year. Love your narratives.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I had a question, just my ignorance. So we have grants, but they don't show up here. So they cover things other than these expenses.
The grants cover So here is a list of for the upcoming year. So LCP update, that's our local coastal program. So that fund helps pay for our general updates. So policies. We don't have to dip into our reserves, although we do have to pay our city planner some money. Not all of the money that comes from this grant updates the entire grant itself. But there's an expectation with this grant from the Coastal Commission that we will update our general plan, which is supposed to be updated every 20 years. The last time it was updated was when it was approved in 1980. So that's kind of a bummer, but we're still working on it. Calorie cycle, these two grants that are in progress have to do with the state mandate for composting, I think, or organic waste reductions.
Exactly.
So we're working with a team of county, the cities, talking about ways that we can somehow work with our haulers, our waste haulers, to see if there's a way. I think Ecology in our data, they have a composting option for their customers. Humboldt Sanitation, who calls Trinidad Department. Yeah. So those grants are designed to look at a regional effort, which Trinidad is a part of, to find ways to offer curbside compost.
And also food recovery.
Food recovery.
I think my question was more that in putting the budget together, you don't consider what grants do is over here. And this is about.
Yes, so the general funds, imagine that's what you're checking, right? And then the grants are sort of like it depends on how well we qualify. You can't really count on, we're gonna get a grant. No, it's all about our eligibility. It's all about our competitiveness. So you're right, the general fund is sort of in its own pot, and how hard that general fund gets hammered really depends, again, on how well our grants perform. So if our grants do a really good job and they do a good job of paying for things that we would otherwise have to use our checking account for, then the grants are reducing the liabilities on that general fund, and the general fund can spend money on other things, maybe that is not restricted, because that's discretionary funds that you as a council member can say, hey, I want $500 for the animal. As long as you make that decision up front, it's a legal decision and it's safe and protected. Whereas the grants, you have to specifically use them for what you got. And the list of grants up here, you know, I think our grant team is pretty spectacular. I think Eli maybe had a conversation with somebody at the county. I think maybe Sean in the county should maybe take a few notes from our grant team, because apparently they don't have as robust.
Yeah, they asked to have our grant team contact them, which was a plus. I did want to help answer that Katie's question. So the bulk of what Gabe is talking about is the general fund budget. Here, even separately, we do have, beyond the general fund, the special revenue funds. So the Cox grant, that's a special fund budget. And integrated waste management is a special revenue fund budget. And the cemetery is a separate budget, and the water fund is a separate budget. And the grants themselves, because they're granted to us by other agencies, between our grants team and their grant people, they come up with their own budget. And that tells us what we can spend on and the parameters. Yeah, so that's why when you're dealing with cities, instead of the same kind of budgeting that they do for businesses, cities, it's called fund accounting. And you have all these individual funds. So there are little pockets of money, and then you figure out what to do. Exactly. Yeah.
Other questions for Gabe?
That's good. Yeah, great job, Gabe. This is a lot of good information.
At least we're eating our dinner as we.
Yes. Chilling, talking at the same time.
Are there any public comments or questions for Gabe regarding the budget? 8:30. We hadn't had dinner, so we're making do here.
One for Gabe or Eli. I know we were meeting in the past with the county and West Hills both regarding CSA 4, there was discussion about a cost sharing for. I just don't have the granular detail. I just want to make sure that if we haven't spent that yet, that that's still in there, that maybe there's consideration for cost increase from the fire budget to, or where that's going to come from for kind of sorting out the next steps for fire protection.
So that was a good question. So we put in last.
By the way, phenomenal summary.
So easy to read all in one place. We can refer to it back in the June 11th meeting. So let's see. So in the fire budget this was a call that I made because last year we put in. So we have 10,000. It's highlight. I don't think you can see that area.
Yeah.
But we've got 10,000 say CSA 4 contribution. So I'm leaving this in there. Last year we had plugged in 35,000, and that was based on what the outside community residents who are subject to the CSA 4, it's about $150 per month. So we did that with all the Trinidad. We figured it would be around $30,000. The last year's budget, we thought we were kind of moving fast, steering towards the CSA discussion. We put that 35,000 in there. Didn't happen, right? So it's just sitting in there. It wasn't designated as a reserve account. It was just put in there so that the city could actually demonstrate that there's a new line item for it. So it's reduced to 10,000 this year because it did have an even more dramatic impact on that bottom line of our budget. It brought it into the 50s. But it doesn't mean it can't go back. And there's a line item for it dedicated. That if it were needed, we could just plug it right in. And that's for if the contract was approved. And I'm not saying I don't have any understanding at this point in time, at this day, that there's a CSA contract that is before us for this fiscal year.
Right. No, there's not. My question is was more of the discussion point. I thought was that the county, ourselves, and the rancheria had each agreed to contribute 1/3 towards a consultant to come in and evaluate different service options.
Yeah, through that.
And I want to make sure if that never got, because I've not been looped in on that since that's specifically my question. This is phenomenal to see that we're kind of thinking that model, although the county wants to get out, see it's a 4 separate discussion, but I just want to make sure that still is in our budget, so that way, because that's something we need to continue to push and advance on.
No more rat. Did we ever hear from LAFCO?
No, we made the initial contribution between the city, the county, and the rancheria. Yeah.
Yeah, we actually participated in that.
Right.
Question.
Right.
We wrote the check to that money.
Yeah, that's the initial to get it started.
Right.
You know, we haven't heard back from them. Number one, where they're at, and number two, how much more they might need.
Okay.
And this fund set aside in case there is more money needed is we've got 10,000 budgeted.
All right, thank you.
All right, other public comments or questions regarding the 2025 budget or either resolution? Okay, I see none. I'll bring it back to the council for a potential motion.
I'll make a motion. I think there's a lot of stuff here. I move that we accept resolution 2024 adopting the 2025 budget. That we also the resolution 2024-12, the one-time general fund transfer of $300,000 to the water fund for emergency budget stabilization, and resolution 2024-13 recognizing the water fund reserve status and updating 2017 and 2020 fiscal reserve policies to align with our rate of targets to 2029. That's all I'm going to say.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Right, all those in favor?
And before you vote, I was just gonna ask you real quickly, do you think Russ might want us to just vote on each of these separately?
Be done for saying.
Attorneys usually like everything done. So
Yeah, just to be on the safe side.
Okay. All right, do you want to, Councilor West, would you mind
Okay.
restating for
No,
number one?
I'm going to just state, number one, resolution 2024-11, the budget. Second.
Seconded by Councilor Tuttle. All those in favor? Aye.
And then resolution 2024-12, the general fund transfer of $300,000 to the water fund. Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
And resolution 2024-13, recognizing the water fund reserve status and updating it and so forth. Second.
Right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
I love that so forth and so on.
And I feel like we're at a good, pretty close to a halfway point. We're gonna try to track, because move things along, because I know Councilor Tuttle has a hard stop in a bit. And, but I do have to ask for a 5-minute stretch break. That's okay. All right. So 5 minutes, we'll be back at about 8:45.
I think most of these are gonna go fast.
I think you're gonna take more work about them a lot.
Yeah.
Yes. We want, we just got enough states.
You know.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's nice, you know, be able to spend more time during it.
What's
Recording stopped.
So.
Oh, that's. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Oh, yeah, it is. Yeah. Yeah, right. It just said. That should be. Right.